Thomas. I work at Zions Bank. I'm also a PhD candidate at George Mason University. This talk, Cyber Insurance Emperor Has No Clothes, I think is different from all the other talks for two reasons. First of all, it's probably the least technical in the computer science sense of the term. The focus here is on how organizations work and how they make decisions. Second difference is I'm not going to try to fill the whole time with presentation. I'm hoping that people here in the audience have questions, they want to discuss some things brought up, maybe they even want to present a contrary point of view. And I'm not going to provide all the information on this topic. Right up there you see the URL for my blog. The blog post on this topic is the first one that you'll see on that homepage. So please go there if you want to learn more details and understand the fine points of the argument. So two preliminaries. First of all, I'm here presenting a reasoned argument. This is the initial part of an investigation. I can't say that every point I'm presenting is fully defended or justified, but I do believe this whole topic has not been sufficiently analyzed. Now, as hackers, one of the things we do is we challenge assumptions, and we especially poke our fingers at how things are supposed to work to see if they work somewhat differently. And my whole thesis here is the value of cyber insurance has not been sufficiently challenged from a functional and operational standpoint. So the second preliminary is I'm not here to bash insurance companies or insurance people. Quick show of hands. Anybody here from the cyber insurance industry? I see at least one. Very good. Okay. So whether you're here in person or you're here virtually or you hear about this talk, there may be other domains where people complain about the insurance companies. This is not one of them. So what I'm really here to talk about is not the risk transfer function of cyber insurance. Perfectly valid function that has its own business case. I'm really here to talk about the incentive and risk pricing function of cyber insurance. So where did this notion of insurance as incentives come about anyway? So it actually started out in the early 1800s. This happens to be the economist Jeremy Bentham. And when they thought about social goods in general, rewards and punishments basically boiled down to some combination of carrots and sticks. And Bentham and other people who came after him, their theory of human behavior is if you get the right combination of carrots and sticks, people in society are going to do what you want them to do, or they're going to do good things. So this theme has carried forward. And if any of you have been to a cyber insurance conference, you've been talking to policymakers, in the back of their mind and sometimes in the front of their mind is this whole notion of, well, cyber insurance is potentially good because it provides positive incentives so we don't have to bring out as many sticks. Well, there's something problematic about simplifying it that level, and I'm going to go through a number of objections. But first, I'm going to present the point of view of somebody you may recognize, the character of Malcolm Tucker from the British series The Thick of It. And he had his own particular twist on the carrot and stick strategy.
I think we should use the carrot and stick approach, yeah. You take a carrot, you stick it up his fucking ass, followed by the stick, followed by an even bigger, rougher carrot.
So the point of presenting that is simply an academic or an idealized notion of carrots and sticks can be quite problematic when they're in the hands of any particular organization or any particular institution to implement. So where did this idea come from that insurance would be a good incentive and information system for risk reduction? Well, it turns out it was the Hartford Steam Boiler Company in 1866. And this is a picture of their stock certificate. and it shows various calamities. Industrial boilers, steamship boilers, railroad boilers were blowing up with high propensity, and Hartford Steam Boiler Company was the first to build a successful insurance-based business model. But I've highlighted here, it was the inspection and insurance company, not just the insurance company. So right from the very start, they had a model of people and knowledge and expertise and customer engagement that would make risk reduction central to the product that they were offering. So one way of characterizing this debate over cyber insurance is security, roughly speaking, like steam boilers? Can it be managed and influenced that way? My reasoned argument is no, for 10 reasons. And each of these 10 reasons may be relatively true or not true in any particular circumstance. One of the things that troubles me about this belief that cyber insurance is an unmitigated good, and if everybody applied it, things would be better, is it only takes a couple of these 10 reasons to cause the system to fall apart in any particular company or in any particular insurance pool. So the Exploring Possibility blog goes into great detail into the following 10 reasons. I'm going to read them off quickly, then I'm going to sort of dive into 2 of them before leading into our discussion, okay? So first point is cyber insurance is bought in your firm by the wrong people, and it's sold by the wrong people. The people who are selling cyber insurance are the same people who sell property and casualty and errors and omissions and every other line of insurance. They have no particular knowledge or expertise in cyber insurance or cybersecurity. Likewise, the people that buy it in your organization tend to be the risk managers, the CFO, people quite distant from security. Now this one is a little bit more controversial and a little bit more technical, but we often believe that insurance companies will be able to pool all kinds of information and come up with magical formulas or actuarial models of risk and then be able to underwrite insurance based on that. And I think the actual information basis for doing that is rather weak. And anybody I've talked to or presentations I've seen in the insurance business tells me that they're struggling in this arena. Show of hands, how many people have actually read through the coverage of your company's cyber insurance program? Okay, not very many. That doesn't surprise me, by the way. If you ever get a chance, please try to look through it. Metaphorically, it's Swiss cheese. It covers some things, excludes other things. The whole logic of the contract is to serve the insurance company, not to serve you, and especially not to serve an improvement program in security. Number 4, the claims process is both too expensive, too uncertain as to whether or not it's going to pay off, and certainly not frequent enough to provide feedback between your company and your insurance provider. Number 5, the two-way information flow aside from claims is woefully inadequate. Now, insurance companies are expanding somewhat in this area by contracting with risk rating firms like BSidesSF, but it is nowhere close enough to what it needs to be. Number 6, the cycle time between stimulus, meaning something happens in your organization, something changes in the environment, and something changing in your policy is way too slow. It may be 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months before some change in the threat environment or the security environment is reflected in your policy. And that is way too slow to have a useful influence on security decision making. So one of the conventional wisdoms is higher cyber insurance premiums will be a signal that your cybersecurity practices need to improve. And conversely, if you do good at that, your insurance premiums are going to fall. Well, in the blog post, I enumerate a whole bunch of reasons why this is a noisy signal, and it's not a very reliable signal too. And I'm going to go into this a little bit in the following discussion. Now, number 8 doesn't get talked about enough. I believe strongly that firms need to focus on retaining risk to the extent that they can, because firms are in the best ability to understand what they are and to mitigate them. So even if risk transfer makes sense from a corporate finance standpoint, it should be a second or third line of defense, not a primary one. Insurance company risk models fit their needs, not your needs. They don't supersede the need and requirement to develop risk models internally or in conjunction with your service providers. And finally, and this, I've gotten debate on this topic, it really does not fit networked interdependent risk. Yes, there's something called third-party risk contracts, but when I say network interdependent, I'm talking about the sort of modularity between coverage, so all of the players in a supply chain or in a value chain or in a value network have complementary incentive signals rather than the incentive to put the blame or the liability or responsibility on someone else. And I think we learned some lessons here. It was at the Target breach where the blame was put on their third-party contractor. We see this happening a lot. Okay, so I want to look at 2 of these in more detail, and I'm going to provide some data from a survey that somewhat supports and maybe contradicts some of the points I'm making. So the 2 characters in the foreground are the people who are buying and selling. Let's say the red is the insurance company and the white is your firm. Somewhere in the background is people involved in InfoSec, whether it's the CISO, whether it's your technical architects, enterprise architects. These are not at the focal point. You're not choosing the company, you're not choosing the coverage, you're not dictating the information flow process. So here's data from the survey. They talked to 203 people who were involved in information security. You notice the deciders here, the executive board, the executive management of the board of directors. Lots of influencers, but the senior security management, compliance, and technical people are at the bottom of the list in terms of the people that are involved in recommending. I've got a couple quotes on this in a second. So I apologize for the pie charts. I did a cut and paste here. This sort of goes against data visualization best practices. So yes, the technical people are frequently involved, but quotes from the survey are very revealing. So the risk managers themselves that are on point really are not very well informed and don't feel very knowledgeable about cybersecurity. So they depend upon the technical people, but the technical people don't generally involve because often they don't even see the value in the exercise. And it appeared to me from the survey, the technical people get involved when it comes to filling out the surveys, filling out the audit reports. So it's a one-way flow, it's a checkbox type task, it's not collaborating on the decision making. So I think that's further supporting the idea that we don't have the right people at the table in the buying and selling decision. Therefore, you're not going to end up with cyber insurance coverage that drives improvement in security. So the other theme I want to, or problem area I want to focus in on is the variation in premiums. So some of you may know about the publication Virus Bulletin. This is John Hawes. I believe this was a 2013 article that he put out in Naked Security. He capsulized what many, many people say about cyber insurance. And they'll use the same connections. They'll connect it to auto insurance or home insurance, and they say, well, if you do these things, your premiums will go down. Well, let's look at what the survey says about that. So first of all, of the 203 people, only 33% actually, their firm engaged in cyber insurance. And of those, 30%, the insurance is bundled in with a whole bunch of other things. Now think about that for a second. If you've got a comprehensive corporate policy that covers cyber insurance, errors and omissions, property and casualty, a whole bunch of other stuff, how big and how important is the cyber insurance signal in there about how big your premium's going up and down? So at least 1/3 of the people are not getting a very good signal out of this in the first place. And then the question is, well, what happens to that signal at all? Well, some people will say, well, in order to qualify for cyber insurance in the first place, you've got to bring your cybersecurity up to a certain level. Well, here's a survey of underwriters, happens to be 194 of them, and here's all the things that they say disqualified somebody from cyber insurance. Well, this looks like a decent, what you might call hygiene list, but I don't know anybody in this room, a CISO or even a technical manager, who would say, if I only do these things, then I'm doing top-notch cybersecurity. This is the ante, this is the entrance stakes, and if cyber insurance only gets you to the ante, we can't really make a claim that it's taking you to any level of excellence. And here's a similar set of questions, which is, to me, what's most important. What changes did you make in your organization because you engaged with or purchased cyber insurance? Number one is implemented policies and processes. Could be good or could be meaningless, depending upon what those policies and processes are. And the last element I want to bring up before opening up for discussion and debate here is, this is just one headline I've seen recently. So a British firm, CFC Underwriting, in one of their annual meetings, presented some survey results, and they say, insurance premiums are rising, and we believe it's the fear of security incidents like the Yahoo breach, which is increased demand. And any market where demand increases and supply is restrained, prices are going to go up. Well, if prices go up, not because my firm is doing worse, but because lots of other people are buying the product, what kind of signal does that send to my firm? Okay, so there's lots of factors that drive premium prices up and down. There's even lots of debate in this industry whether it's going to turn out to be cyclical like property and casualty or it's going to be stable. But the whole notion that premium prices or coverages themselves are going to be a good, reliable signal, I think is fallacious. So that ends the core of my talk. I'm getting approached by several publishers. Here's O'Reilly. Maybe we got a book deal in the works. And now I want to open up, we've got about 13 minutes for questions, comments, and counter arguments. Right down in front. I'll try and repeat the question. Go ahead. Stand up.
I'll be able to talk then. So I tend to agree with your points about the effect of cyber insurance on the corporation as it's buying the insurance. What would be your thoughts around the effect of cyber insurance as driving the overall quality of security in products that are being purchased? In other words, the cyber insurer is a more knowledgeable buyer of security, so it reduces the information asymmetry.
Okay, excellent question. So I have two answers to that. First of all, I see no operational on-the-ground evidence that cyber insurance firms are building expertise to the level they need. One piece of evidence is who attends conferences like this, who attends the workshop on the economics of information security, who presents there. It's not the cyber insurance company. They are following rather than leading. The second thing is, let's consider an alternative to cyber insurance. Let's say there is industry associations or even government agencies that simply pay you for implementing the NIST cybersecurity framework, or pick any framework you want. Why do we have, what is the value, social value of having the insurance, the coverage, the claims process? There's quite a lot of informational and functional overhead associated with it without clear evidence that they're going to provide the value, the driving force that you just described. Now, I think alternative insurance type products that have a completely different institutional structure could work, but I don't think the current model in cyber insurance will do it. Okay, next question. Yes, please.
One, just to push back a little, it is still in its infancy, so you shouldn't be comparing it to a 100-year-old insurance. You should be comparing it to 1880s steam insurance, which didn't work out that well either. Hopefully in time it will work out. The other point is you made the point that, hey, they're only basically pushing minimum hygiene. I think minimum hygiene does need to get pushed. There is a lot of problem. Where would be minimum hygiene?
Okay, the gentleman brought up 2 points. First of all, he says cyber insurance is in its infancy. It's maybe not fair and maybe not proper to criticize it in its current form. Maybe give it time. It's got to go through its growth spurts. And the second point is, well, maybe pushing hygiene is a sufficiently valid reason. Okay. On the first point, I would like to be more optimistic. In fact, I like to believe in the creativity of nascent industries. Unfortunately, what I see here, so compare it to the rest of what's called fintech, peer-to-peer lending, micro lending. There's a huge energy of creative entrepreneurship in fintech. We do not see the same in cyber insurance, and I wish there was. And the reason being is this is all happening within the existing institutional structure of insurance. It's the same companies, the same legal process, the same regulatory structure, the same human beings with their same skill set. And they're trying to say, well, cyber insurance is like all these other lines, and we're going to invest in it, and we're going to grow. And by the way, that's why you see some people wanting to have a government mandate for insurance to drive adoption, right? Okay, so the second point about hygiene. In other presentations, I have had some negative things to say about aiming for hygiene because I think it aims too low. On the other hand, what's called hygiene is so obviously bad in so many places, a case could be made that we've got to drain that particular swamp. I would argue that there are better ways. And I certainly wouldn't claim that the major social value of cyber insurance will be to drive hygiene, because there's a dozen other ways that'll be more economical and more effective to do it than that. Other questions? Anybody strongly disagree with any of these 10? Have different points of view? Yeah.
What about the PR aspect? It seems like sometimes the negative PR has a greater impact than the actual risk in insurance claim.
Okay, so his question is, what about the PR aspect? You mean the PR aspect of big claims and big breaches, or the... So he's asking about the public reaction to what? Okay, so he's saying companies tend to react to negative publicity around breaches, and that's sort of what that British underwriting firm was arguing, that they're seeing demand for insurance because of these highly publicized breaches. I'm not sure how that relates to the effectiveness of cyber insurance, though. Do you have anything to...
I think his question is more along the line of effectively communicating the brand damage aspect into the business and saying, hey, is cyber insurance doing anything to mitigate those costs, because those seem to be more important costs to the business?
Okay, so he's adding that this puts a spotlight on brand damage associated with breaches and things that might be covered under an insurance policy, whereas otherwise they may not be given visibility. Soft costs. That's a valid argument. And if the claims process was more expeditious, so take, for example, the Target breach or the Sony breach. To my knowledge, and even the Heartland breach, it was 4 or 5 years before the insurance payouts were made. Maybe it's 3 years. It's not the same year. It's not within 6 months. So there's a time urgency. If we think about the DFIR investigation, the attribution investigation, the corrective action, right? So the type of corrective action you've got to do in your vendor value chain, all that has to happen on a very quick time scale. Even personnel changes in the firm, right? We have inadequate staffing. We have inadequate leadership in our security organization. That's going to happen within a few months. And if the insurance settlement and payout is years later, that is way too slow to have an influence on the process. And in the blog post, I talk about a number of strategies that corporate executives could take to minimize the premium cost in the short run to meet their numbers. Because if they get held, if you're, I can't see the number, raise a finger. Okay, thank you. I'll be done in just 2 minutes. If you are a chief financial officer and you're leading the risk committee and you're going in front of the board, and let's say the board is going to be really hard-ass about this, and they're going to want to say, you as chief financial officer will not get your bonus if our cyber insurance premiums go above X, or we encounter an increase of such and such a size. Now, who here has seen a performance measurement system gamed or scammed or manipulated? I know I have. If you read the news, it's happened in public education, it happened in Toshiba, it's happened lots of places. I've seen it happen on enterprise-wide IT projects. So the first place to manipulate that is in the coverage, right? Who's going to read 47 pages of coverage? And there's lots of things you can do to manipulate and control the amount of premium that you're charged, which is the visible thing, without actually improving security. And maybe your successor is going to deal with the consequences of that. So if I'm a CFO, if I'm 5 years away from retirement, I'm gambling that within the next 5 years, either I don't have a breach, or if we do, this insurance settlement happens after I'm gone, or it's the responsibility is diffused. So I guess the last thing, is there any other questions or? Yes, please.
Jeremy, is there room, it's so fucking broken, is there room for a startup to come in and just, like, disrupt the life?
Okay, this is a superb question. Thank you, sir. He said, it's so fucking broken, is there room for a startup? So I have 2 answers to that. Yes, and it's the road less traveled, meaning you're going to be walking 40 miles through the desert eating locusts for a long time. Because if you compare what it would take to do a startup in this environment to the latest in AI for threat intelligence or any purely technology thing, we do not have, including the funding agencies, the venture capital agencies, good models for how to develop this. Now, I believe there will be entrepreneurial organizations going after it, but you're going to have to start small, very niche focused, and develop something that works in the classic disruptor type model, right? The ignored part of the marketplace, and then get momentum so that you can start taking over more of the mainstream. So thanks everybody for your attention. Thanks for your questions. Take a look at the blog. Follow me on Twitter.
Thank you, Russell. On behalf of BSides and Fitbit, here's a Fitbit.
And I think the organizers deserve yet another round of applause. These guys do an awesome job, twice as many attenders as last year. I really appreciate their work.
Thank you. And a huge thanks to our sponsors, Fitbit, HarkaOne, and Verisprite. We'll be back at 4:10. Thank you.